If you know me at all, you know I love Game of Thrones. And I don't just love the show, I love everything about Westeros. I love the banners, I love the families, I love the people, I love the character, I love the setting. I love the kind of sneaky low fantasy in a high fantasy universe that you kind of don't realize is actually high fantasy until it's kind of too late. I love everything about it. I would live in Westeros. I would want to be a Fossaway if I could be. This is how much I love the show. And I don't just love the show, I love everything in that universe. I played the CK2 mod an enormous amount. I played the Warband mod. There's a bunch of other games and mods I've checked out and different like fan-made things that I've seen, but I never really got into the books. I tried to get into the books when I first started watching the show. I think it was in between season 3 and 4. I really wanted to get into the books because at the end of season 2 and 3, people were starting to tell me that the books were better. Everything was better in the books, and we're missing out so much in the show from the books. They're deleting characters, they're changing plots. So I never really had that understanding of that, but I wanted to try to get it. I always had a problem. I feel like attention span is really hard for me. I feel like dedicating time is really hard for me. So these books are long. I never really felt like I would be able to get through them in a quick manner. And I always felt like I wasn't a very quick reader either. Like it would take me a long time to read even one chapter on these books. But I recently, things in my life have really shifted recently. So I've been trying to dedicate more time to kind of relaxing and dedicating time for that. So I decided to start reading the books again. Now, I have already read those books, quote unquote, read them in the time between season 3 and 4, like I said. But what I actually did was just listen to the audiobook. And like I said, attention issues aside, basically that was just me listening to them while I was playing World of Warcraft or doing some other activity. I wasn't really even paying attention. So I started reading the books again, and I just read the second book in its entirety. And I was really shocked at how much I did not retain. Like, I honestly did not remember almost any of it, even though I know I listened to the audiobook from the first 4 books. I don't remember much of it. I remember some story beats, but I don't really remember any details. So today in this video, I'm going to give you my thoughts on season 2 of Game of Thrones versus the second book in the Song of Ice and Fire, okay, Clash of Kings. I think it should be my favorite book. I really do, because I love the aftermath of Eddard Stark's death. Okay, so obviously, if you're watching this, there's going to be some spoilers. I'm going to try to I'm going to try to chill on the spoilers, but there will be some spoilers because we have to dedicate a lot of time in this video to the actual events that are different between the show and the book. Okay, so, but yeah, immediately I would say that even though the second season of the show would not be my favorite season, the concept of the aftermath of Eddard Stark's death and the War of the Five Kings is without, that's just my favorite period in Westeros. I really love the Blackfire Rebellion. I really love Robert's Rebellion. I love the rebellions. I love when the wars are there in the kingdoms. When things are in peace, you don't really have as much fun. Now, House of the Dragon was actually very interesting for that reason, because it was very peaceful for the first 5 or 6 episodes, and it was actually kind of cool to just see Westeros in a state of peace with some high grandeur around it. But ultimately, what I love the most is the politicking and the allegiances that form and how the realm splits. That's partially why I love the CK2 mod, because it really, really, really encapsulates that very well. It shows the actual splitting of the realm very well. And again, I think this is why I would like the second book the most. So I started reading the second book, and it did not disappoint. The big things that I loved about the Game of Thrones season 2, conclusions and way things played out, was showing the different kings in their natural state, in the things that they were doing leading up to the war. The beginning of season 2 starts with the aftermath of Daenerys and Eddard's conclusions from season 1 and book 1, and it's totally different by the end of the show. By the end of season 2, so much has happened. I think it really is the season that the most happened. But the thing I liked the most about it was following the kings and the War of the Five Kings in general, and seeing the Greyjoy turn and the whole situation on that side, attacking the north, because in the beginning of season 2 he's helping Robb, and then by the end of season 2, well, things are not going very well for Theon. So I really, really, really like that, and I think the season has the most actual development of any season of the show, and I think book 2 probably would follow suit in that. I haven't read the rest of them now, but I would imagine that I would say that about book 2 after I finished all of them. But it's not just the actual events that I liked in book 2 the most. It was the fact that it really dug deep into all the small details of these events. Like, for example, we get to hear a lot more about the actual Rainbow Guard, the King's Guard, quote unquote, the legendary fighters that Renly Baratheon has assembled. I have talked about this a lot, but Renly Baratheon is my vote. If there was going to be a king, it would have been him. I would have voted for him. Even though, Stannis had the more legitimate claim. Obviously, I think Renly was the better candidate, and I like the kind of almost grandeur that he carried. I think that was perfect, and I love the way it was displayed. I think the actual writing of his death ultimately, and the way it kind of scatters to the wind, and everybody's trying to hang on to that, is perfect for the world of Westeros and A Song of Ice and Fire, because that's exactly what you would expect to happen. You can't have nice things in Westeros. But Renly tried, and he was the only one, I think, out of everybody who was trying that was actually maybe had a chance at succeeding. But I really, really, really like how we got to learn about all the Kingsguard and the actual individual, like, lords of his, the scene at Bitterbridge where he is, kind of almost holding court, even though they should be at war. It's just such a cool concept. I love the character, and it was so much more deep than in the show. In the show, we see a very similar outline of events happen with Renly leading up to his ultimate death, but it is so much more watered down. We don't see Bitterbridge at all. I don't think there's any reference to them being anywhere near any type of civilization. And most importantly, we don't see Storm's End. I'm not sure why the show never showed Storm's End until the next series, until House of the Dragon. But that's something that's very strange and unfortunately takes away a lot of the power of the universe, of the world of Westeros. And of course, Storm's End is one of the major keeps. It's the biggest kind of battlefield for the two brothers who are fighting against each other. Even though it's not super featured in the actual book either, it is still a huge backdrop. So just kind of getting that, entrenched look at these different characters. I think that's the thing I like the most about the books in general, but book 2 especially, because it really makes you feel like you're part of the universe. Like, I think, even in book 1, they do this really well, and the show kind of does it, but, you don't hear the names of these characters. Like, for example, you see a bunch of side characters kind of that become important for the Stark household, and they get carried on into book 2, like Poxy, Tim, or whatever these small characters are in the north, basically, all around. They have these names and these characters that actually matter, but they're not really main characters, so they're actually in the show too. They have people playing them, but they don't have names. They don't ever get referred to. They're just standing by, and they're just kind of there, but they're still there, but you just don't know who they are. So in the book, you get to learn a lot more about them, and you hear their names, and it seems like it matters more. So their deaths ultimately matter more, in my opinion, for that reason. But yeah, like I said, Renly's side of that is the best. I think that's absolutely the best. And then how a lot of it turns over to Stannis. But I will say that for everybody who claimed that the books are just better, like I think a lot of people just say objectively better. And I can see why, because there's more time for details. It's easier to write about some of these things than it is to show some of these things. It's also the opposite, though, I feel like. Unfortunately, there's a lot lost, okay? And so I'm going to tell you right now that even though I really enjoyed book 2, I did not prefer it to season 2 of Game of Thrones. And even though I really did enjoy season 2 of Game of Thrones, I did not prefer it to A Clash of Kings. They both are the perfect complement to each other. They're actually, amazing for that. And I fear that that's where that's going to end. This is why I wanted to make a video on book 2 specifically, because I think this is the end of that. I know book 3 and 4 deviate heavily from the story. They tell the story in different timelines. Basically, things are not the same. And as we see at the end of book 2, things are already differing heavily from the show, where book 1 is almost identical. There's some scenes that were omitted, but almost no major. I don't think there was anything major that was really changed. But book 2 has huge departures. Even the ending of season 2 doesn't exist in the book. It is not there. The ending of season 2 is not in book 2. So that should tell you that things were already diverging. And but so the reason that I would say the show is better in many ways is for the actual atmosphere that it can only bring through visual media. You cannot see or hear things when you read a book. I wish you could. But if you had the detail that the book had, like you had all these characters and somehow you knew who they were, and because they don't reference them, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know Robar Royce is the guy with the red armor behind Renly Baratheon. It's told in the book because they have to name the characters. That's the only way you would see them. But in the show, they would just be standing there. You know what I mean? And so they make those changes where they don't show these characters, and I guess partially due to the, the rainbow thing. I don't know exactly why those characters weren't in the show, but they're like, I love that. I love that he has like big name like fighters, like actual martial characters come to him, want that glory. They're young and brash, and they want to win. And they like Robar Royce comes from the Vale. You know what I mean? That dude went to King's Landing and then went with Renly. Like, you know what I mean? That's a hell of a departure from anything that would happen in the show. I don't think you would ever see a character take that arc in the show. But all that aside, the show is far better in the ways of telling you things actually happened, and the visuals of them, obviously, and the music. I mean, I just say right now, the music makes the show. It really does make the show. It's absolutely insane how good like some of the music is. Like the Stark theme is, I could hear it in my head every time I see important visual of Stark culture, or hear a very important word or message from Stark culture. I hear the music play, and we've had a lot of great scenes kind of held up by the music, like in season 6. I won't go too far into that, but yeah, there's a lot of great scenes with a lot of great music in the show that unfortunately is just not something the book could ever replicate. But the main thing I will say about season 2 being better than book 2 was the Battle of Blackwater. I honestly have to say I'm very disappointed in the book. I really, after everything I just said about how great Renly's arc was, and I would prefer him to win. You know what I mean? I would love to see him win, but Stannis wins and he gets a lot of the army, and they make some decisions that lead to him storming King's Landing that you think are going to become a very grand and kind of deserving win for him that ultimately he ends up losing. I expected there to be a lot more depth to that battle. Just like I said with Renly's character missing that depth in the show, I thought that the Battle of Blackwater would miss that depth as well, and that they would be very superficial. And we heard all about this while the show was in development, that season 2, episode 9, the Battle of the Blackwater, was the highest budget episode for HBO ever. It was like multiple $1 million, basically like, I think it was like 90% of the show's budget for one episode, basically. This was mostly because of the green fire, all this stuff that happens in the dark on the water. And so I assumed that was going to be like the big flashy episode, but there was so many small details that weren't there. But it actually turns out to be the opposite, it seems, unfortunately. The scenes where Bronn and the Hound are building up tension before them, that really tells me that the Hound is uncomfortable in this setting, and he's kind of feigning that like belligerence that he kind of puts off in the book and the show, and then he ultimately flees, right? So his manner of fleeing in the show makes way more sense to me than it does in the book. In the book, his character is effectively just gone missing. The point of view style of the books also, I will say, is lacking. I don't like it, honestly, but it's fine. It tells the story well, but I don't love it. It's not a grand slam in my book, but the point of view, I think it's probably Tyrion, or maybe I don't even know whose point of view at that point. It must be Tyrion's, but they just don't know where he is. You know what I mean? He's just gone. They don't see him interact in the way you would see him, where he goes out, everything's on fire, he's freaking out, he comes back in, says fuck the king, and leaves, right? He doesn't do that. He doesn't do it the same way in the books as he does in the show, and it doesn't have that commanding power with Rory McCann, the incredible acting in the show. It's just missing. And you're going to see a lot of that when you compare the Battle of Blackwater to the book, unfortunately. And then one of the things I had known about the show and that differed from the book is that for whatever reason, people believed that it was Renly Baratheon's ghost who lifts the siege on King's Landing. And I looked into this because I heard this brought up. I think maybe it's even mentioned in the show. I don't really know. But I think in the show, Loras Tyrell walks in wearing something that Renly should have been wearing. I think that's how they tie it together. But in the book, and in the people who talk about the books, tell you that Renly Baratheon is looked at as the savior of King's Landing somehow. And this is partially the bridge to the Tyrells joining the Lannisters and all this stuff. So I had expected something big there. I really did. And it's nothing. Like, it's actually nothing. It's Loras has a brother who's not present in the show, which is really interesting. I don't know why they do stuff like that, but he is actually probably more important than Loras, but I think there might be tension there. I don't know. I don't know where those characters are going, but he's not present at all in the book or in the show, and that kind of loses power. It makes the Tyrells seem weaker. I think that's ultimately why George Martin would add characters like that who don't have any actual plot. They're just there to make the house feel stronger. Because if you know your firstborn son is a homosexual and he's certainly not going to be fathering any children, and then you see how it goes out on the show, like what happens to House Tyrell? Like, you know what I mean? So that, I think that's why they have those characters in the show or in the book that aren't in the show. I think it's also because they don't want to pay actors in the book and in the show from the books. But in general, there's that mismatch there, and you expect that to carry on. I expected that to carry on, especially like I said in the Battle of the Blackwater, but I just didn't feel like it did. And I think the biggest failure point of the storytelling of the book compared to the show is that we never actually see Stannis' perspective of the fight. He's not a POV character. I don't know if I think he becomes one later, but he is not one. Davos is the POV character from his side, and they, just like in the show, they kind of lose early. Davos seems to be gone, maybe dead in the second book, and that's it. We never see it from Stannis' side again. Now, like I said, the main reason I like the War of the Five Kings is because you can root for one of these guys. I felt like that was how it was meant to be portrayed in the show. And in the book, it doesn't seem to give you that affordability. It does not offer you the perspective of Stannis. It doesn't even really offer you the perspective of Renly. It kind of shows you the side of Renly, but then he's gone. And then Stannis all of a sudden is just like a different actor altogether. Like he doesn't seem to have a personality. He's just being a personal relationship to Davos, and then everything that unfolds through Davos. So once Davos is ultimately removed from that story beat, it's gone. Like I don't know what Stannis is even doing. Like where is he? He doesn't seem to be in the battle. So I don't know why they would change that in the show. Like, I don't know what the actual directors and writers of the show were thinking, but he is the main character in the episode. He's an incredible main character. And I think one of my favorite lines from the episode is where they seem to have been caught in this trap. Tyrion sets the trap for them at the Battle of the Blackwater, and he turns to Davos and says, like, he can't play that trick twice. I don't exactly remember the quote, but it's like a pretty cold ass line, dude. Like, he just watched like a big chunk of his fleet get killed and burned to death, and he's like, we're still going, brother. Like, this is what I want. Like, I'm trying to win, And so he's just not there. He just doesn't say that. He's not present. He never seems to appear. I don't know why. Now, I talked to some people about the books over the years, and they say that they want to try to keep the kings aloof from the plot. They do not want them to feel like the main characters, and the main characters are meant to be the side characters who ultimately develop into the Song of Ice and Fire as the main characters. But I don't agree with that perspective, because Daenerys is one of the kings, effectively. You know what I mean? Like, she's a driving force in the action, and she's a POV character for the whole time. So you can't really tell her story without her being. So I guess this is a fault of how it's written, but I just think that's kind of telling you a little bit about why the POV idea, I don't think it's great. I think it's a little weak. But the story and the world of Westeros carry it. Like, it's not the best way to tell the story, but it's fine because we see it from the perspective of interesting characters that we learn a lot about. And I think probably about 90% of what you would want to know about the actual characters that those characters are around is still divulged. It just was shocking to me how, it also seemed like the Battle of the Blackwater did not take place at night, which definitely is important in the show. I feel like it really lends to the ominousness of it. And yeah, but I think almost everything else was the same. There's some different characters like the Kettle Blacks. They're not seemingly at all in the show. I don't think they're featured whatsoever. There's a lot of like weird, non-complete situations in the show where like there's a missing Kingsguard and it's just not filled. Like, you don't know who all the Kingsguards are. Like, they're just not there. And so in the book they obviously fill that detail. Of course, that's one of the things about the book that make it better. But it's always stuff like that where there's like, oh, who's the current Lord of Storm's End? I don't know. I haven't gotten far enough in the books, but like, yeah, there's going to have to be answers to that. You know what I mean? I think George Martin would not allow that to be unanswered, whereas the show just goes the whole time without any Storm's End stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that the book has some really, really, really great points to it. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I was actually, I verbally gasped. I verbally gasped at the ending of it because I was so shocked to learn that the ending was not what I expected it to be. And yeah, you can read it if you want to see, but it is not the ending of season 2. I will just say that. And yeah, some differences occur to get us there, but I think for the most part, it's almost the same. Like, it's really, if you only watched, if you read a summary of both, you would be like, oh, that's the same plot. And I think that's why I wanted to make this video specifically about Book 2 and Season 2, because I feel like that's probably where it ends. I think Season 3 and Book 3 are going to diverge heavily based on what I have seen. I just started reading like the prologue for Book 3 now, and it seems like George Martin's even telling you like, hey, listen, things are about to go way different now. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really, really good way to do it, though. I think if you enjoyed the show and you've never read the books, you should do that. You should now read them. I think a lot of people probably would do the opposite. They would start with the books and read the show, maybe, or watch the books and read the show. Yeah, no. Anyway, I think you could do the opposite and it could be good, but I think if you are a lover of the show, you will enjoy the books as long as you like the world of Westeros, as long as you have the patience for the characters and the way kind of jumps around a lot. That's also part of the show. It actually fits the show way, 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 way better because every week we have a plot point that has to end on some kind of suspenseful note. And that's exactly how the books are written. That's actually maybe really why they did the series because it does feel that way. It's like we'll go like 6 chapters in between Daenerys chapters. You know what I mean? So we don't see a single thing from Essos for like thousands of pages, not thousands, but like a lot of words. Let's put it that way. And then all of a sudden you're back with her and you're like, oh, wait, where was she again? Like, what was she doing? You know what I mean? That's exactly how it goes in the show. But in the show, it makes sense because there's real-time weeks in between each episode if you watch them when they were live. And now, the book, it's almost kind of like if you take a couple days off of reading, you almost feel like you're starting back over with some of these characters. So I would prefer, I guess there's just no way to do it, though. I can't come up with a better way. But I think that's why I prefer the Dunk and Egg story. I have read those. I read all 3 of those twice, and they are excellent. If you want to get started on reading in Westeros, I would recommend those. They are very, very, very good, and they are very simple, complete, basic stories. That's why I like House of the Dragon too, although I've never read whatever book is supposed to be associated with that. When I first started watching and reading the books and stuff, that wasn't there. I think that's a newer book, Fire and Blood, I think it's called, or something like that. I did not read that, but I know everything about it. I'm, like I said, a huge fan, and I would constantly read the Wikipedia and stuff just to learn about stuff I don't know. So a lot of the stuff that I'm reading in the book I already knew because I just read the details on Wikipedia. Like, I'm willing to spoil myself, and I still enjoy it. Does that make sense? That's how good this shit is. So, yeah. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are, especially if you have thoughts on the whole series or other seasons. I know a lot of people look at season 6 and maybe I think mostly 7 and 8 as bad, but I will tell you, the rushed nature of it was very bad. But the actual plot I liked, and I do think that George Martin will probably not finish the books because it's the same plot that he wanted to get to. It's just going to get there way, 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 way different than the actual books will. So I think, unfortunately, this is the best we're going to get. So enjoy it while you have it, because who knows what the future of Westeros look like. And I think we're going to start seeing an alternate history of Westeros come out where people are just no longer regarding the books as the main source of entertainment. Unfortunately, he's probably just not. I don't imagine he's going to write another book in Westeros. So now is our chance. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you guys think. We'll see you guys in the next one. I have no idea.